Alrighty, girls. A couple of years ago when we were making those 6-inch blocks, I could not find a 6-inch block pattern. With this, we could have cut something down. It's really not rocket science. We're going to start here with our old friend, the 9 patch. That's something, this is easy enough to start with here. And I made this into a 9-inch square. And you sort of make the 9 patch. There are 9 units in a 9 patch. 9 units here in this. Now, if we were going to make this unit separately, because this is a 9-inch square, each unit would be 3 inches finished, right? And if I was going to make that separately, I would cut out this unit 3.5 inches. Now, normally, we're not going to make a 9 patch that way. We're going to make it with strips. But for our discussion, we're going to make this separately. So this is my little unit here. So I'm going to make a little baby quilt here out of 9 patch, and I've got a panel I'm going to use. But my panel is 12-inch. So I need to make a 12-inch 9 patch. So pretend this is 12 inches here. What would be the size of each unit? 4, because you're dividing 3 into 12, and you've got 4. So you would make your square 4 inches plus 1/2. And that's what you're going to cut your square. If I wanted to make it 6 inches square, each unit would be 2, right. And it's as simple as that with everything. The trick is to start with the finished unit size, not the cut size. You can't multiply the cut size. You have to multiply the finished unit size. All right, let's say I don't want to make this so plain. I'm going to jazz it up a little bit with some half-square triangles. My unit size is still the same. It's still 3 inches. So to make a half-square triangle, I'm going, instead of adding 1/2 inch, I'm going to add 7/8 of an inch. So I know we've all made half-square triangles. You take your 2 squares, make your diagonal, sew on either side, and voila, you've got your half-square triangle, and you've got 2 of them. So, if I wanted to make that into a half-square triangle into a 4-inch, I would start with a 4-inch finished square and add 7/8 inch to it. That's all there is to it, to get whatever size you want for that. So, I can do this, and let's say now I want to make a quarter square triangle in the middle of my patch. Same unit size, but this time, now I'm going to add 2 inches. Somebody must have done a demo a long time ago on this and handed out these sheets of paper. And by the way, these instructions are in the back of every Fons and Porter magazine right now. So I made one with instructions that said add 1 1/4. And it came out, and it's sort of square. Sort of. I don't know why, it's just sort of square, but it is. So I went ahead and made it oversized, and then squared it up. So I made this was a 3-inch. I would add 2 inches to it to get a 5-inch, 2 5-inch squares, and make my pattern. If it's a rectangle, if you want to make a rectangle, you've got that in your square. This rectangle, let's say that's 2 by 4. You're going to add a 1/2 inch to that, so that you would cut it out 2 1/2, 2 1/2 by 4 1/2. Just add a 1/2 inch to either side. So if you want a rectangle that's 1 by 3, then you're going to cut it out 1 1/2 by 3 1/2. So let's forget this. Let's leave this just a minute. I wanted to make a quilt that was 48 inches square out of 1 block. And here's the pattern that I chose. Can everybody see that? And that was out of our little, somebody had demoed this many, many years ago. So that's the one I chose to make larger. It's got, so first thing you have to do is sort of lay your little invisible grid on it. Determine how many little units are in your block. If I lay my little invisible grid on there, can you see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units across and 8 units down that are this size. Try to find the smallest unit you've got in your block. So if this was a 12-inch block and there's 8 units across, how big is this block? Take your 12 and divide it by 8 and you get 1 1/2. So if I was going to cut out this little square and make a 12-inch block, I would cut it out 2 inches to make that square. Since I made this into this I enlarged it 400% or 4 times this size. So this block is 4 times the size of this block. This is 48 inches across. 48 inches divided by 8 is 6. A 6-inch finished block, and I cut it out 6 1/2. Now, if you're going to do something like this, I would suggest write down what you are cutting your squares out as, or you will forget. Write down how many how big they are, write down your finished size, your cut size, and then I put a little strap of fabric there to tell me what color I'm cutting.
I found that to be really helpful, especially like on Marilyn's thing when it said your color, and I wasn't out there when you did the demo, but putting that swatch right there saves the mind.
Especially when you're looking at an old pattern, this pattern here, I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at that, and I'm changing the colors. Is there anything else I could have changed? So do that. So I know how to make this. Here's my half square triangle. I've already figured out how to make that larger. Are you with me? You can make that because it's a 6-inch finished square. This right here, this was 4 units size. So that's 2 6s, so that's a 12-inch square right there in the middle. I would also suggest to you, and also here's my goose. My goose. And I'm going to show you how to do the goose here. Make sure you read through your pattern before you start. Because this pattern, these old patterns are not necessarily up to date with the new way of doing things. They wanted me to make a flying geese by cutting the rectangle, then cutting 2 squares, putting them on the corners, flip them over, and cutting off the back. And that's a nice way to do it, but boy, there was a lot of waste doing that. Now to do a flying geese the correct way, which is Thons and Porter or quilt in a day, you are going to take you cut one square 1.5 inches larger than the finished width. So the finished width was 12. So I'm going to cut a square 1.5 inches larger than that. So it's going to be a 13.5 inch square. Then I'm going to cut 4 of these little ones, little squares. And they're going to be 1 inch larger than the finished height. So the finished height was 6. So you're going to cut them 7 inches square. And you end up with 2, not just 1, when you make a flying goose that way.
But no waste.
No waste.
Yeah.
No waste. So I've got these. Now, here's this thing here. I really couldn't figure out any way other than the way they told me to do it, which was cut this square 12 inches, cut the white 12 inches, and then sew the squares on the side, flip them over, and trim them off. You know, I could make 2 flying geese if I wanted a seam in the middle, but I want that hole, so unless you can think of a way to do that without cutting triangles, cutting the square and sewing triangles on the side, which I guess I could have.
It would just be a Y-seam block.
Oh, don't.
Well, you could kind of put your triangles on there, but then, these are bias edges. So,
Well, can't you figure out the size of that square by the purple triangle? Because you cut the long side of that right angle triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You can figure out what C is. That's the...
oh, golly.
Well, she just lost
Cut a
me.
square and get the square.
Those are
Sounds like math.
right? Like a commercial, that's part A or part B and part
You would-
C, and you need that.
It sounds like math. I don't do math.
You would have to cut these purple things 6.5, just like you're cutting these. These are 6.5. These are all the same size unit. You sew that on, and cut them off. Because when you sew your square on there, here's the square you're sewing on. Do that seam and cut it off. When you are enlarging or making something smaller, make sure that the multiple is correct. Let's say I've got my unit here, and it's 9 inches now, but I want a 15-inch square. Well, I can do that. I can make each one of these 5 inches. Can I make it into a 16-inch square? Well, yes, but
Math gets real
yeah, it's funky. I wouldn't want to do that. I would pick something with 4 units across if I want a 16-inch square. So sort of keep that in your head. Yeah. And I also wouldn't want to take this down to a 6-inch square. These little things are going to be way too little to sew to do that way. When you're going from big to small, how small is your smallest unit? So that's what I just told you here. When you're enlarging it, decide which one of these grids you want in your pattern, the 3-inch, 4-inch, 5. And when you're designing a thing, do you want sashing in the middle? When you're determining a size. Right now I'm trying to make quilts 48 inches long because I had Dave make me a quilt hanger 48 inches long to hang on my wall. So that's sort of what I'm aiming towards now. So I have to think about, do I want a sashing in the middle, and how big of the border do I want? Read that pattern through, make sure it makes sense, So make one and look at it. Does it make sense? Because this is like a 6-inch grid. They're either 6 inches or they're 12 inches, and everything else has to fit in that thing. They can't be 13 inches, they can't be 10 inches. They either got to be 6 or they got to be 12. But, you know, most of our patterns are these shapes in different configurations.
In different colors.
Different colors. I really like to go online and look at all those beautiful quilts. You know, and really with this method, all you do is sort of have to hone in and do a small piece at a time. Don't look at that whole quilt and say, oh my God, I can't make that thing. You look at sections of it, divide it up into little sections, figure out the grid line, the unit size.
And they're usually like 2 blocks, 2 different blocks put together over the whole thing.
Yeah. Blocks that we've made, most of those blocks that we've made in different configurations. So, you know, we have all been quilting enough that we can, for heaven's sake, we've done enough of this stuff, doing what people and other people have made and showed us how to do. I think we're ready to go out on our own a little bit.
It's a challenge.
And I would suggest to you, if you're interested in this at all, go home and dig out a pattern, which you've got 1,000 of, and just find a picture of something and see if you can divide it into units. Get that in your head and see if you can do that. Make it twice as big or half and a half.
Next time, ladies, you got your homework.
And it doesn't have to be twice or half. If I want to make, as you go from 9 to 12, that's twice 9 is 18. I went from 9 to 12.
As long as it's divisible by an equal number, not
right.
decimals.
Yeah.
It will work easily.
Yeah. Don't get carried away. Don't make something that's
3.4
doesn't make any
and
sense.
5.9.
Yeah, don't do that. Does it make sense to you?
Until I get home.
Well, you know, start with this. You know, just look at that 9 patch and think it through. And then, you know, look at these little formulas here. And I know you've all got that. If you don't have it, get your phone out here and come take a picture of this. One more whiteboard. I brought it. Let's look at it. Okay, here's my pattern.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where is the block?
Here's the block. There's the block.
Oh my God.
Okay, you want to make this, but I won't give you the pattern. So what are you going to do? Here's the square. So, how many units would you say was in that?
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And my smallest unit is right here. So if I wanted to make this, and let's say I wanted to make it 12 inches, a 12-inch square. So that's going to be 2 inches.
So cut 2.5.
2. And then all these little strips are going to be 2.5. And you can just figure out from there how long they're going to be. Yeah. Okay, girls. Thanks for listening.